The rookie cop thought it was just another routine traffic stop, a chance to prove himself. But when the trucker stepped out, calm and unshaken, something felt off. There was a weight to the man's presence, a quiet authority that made Hadley's instincts scream at him to rethink his approach. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. He had just pulled over the wrong trucker. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know what you were capable of? Share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more gripping tales. The desert highway stretched for miles, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. It was the kind of road where things could go unnoticed for hours, where a mistake could be buried under dust and silence. Rookie Officer Hadley sat behind the wheel of his squad car, tapping his fingers against the dashboard as he watched the truck ahead. A long-haul Peterbilt, its chrome reflecting the golden light, rolling steady down the lonesome stretch of road. Hadley had been itching for something exciting to happen. Ever since he got stationed in this quiet backwater, the most action he'd seen was breaking up bar fights and handing out tickets to old farmers who had a heavy foot on the pedal. He wanted more. He wanted to prove himself, and now he had a chance. The truck had drifted slightly over the faded center linen, not much, but enough. A technical violation. Something he could use. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Gonna make a stop on a big rig heading south." Plate reads. He trailed off as he squinted at the license plate, something about it catching his attention. A Texas plate. No company markings. The kind of rig that looked personal. The voice crackled back through the radio. 10-4, proceed with caution. Hadley flipped on the lights and hit the siren. The truck slowed, then pulled to the side, kicking up dust as it came to a halt. The driver didn't hesitate. No last-second turns or slow rolls. Just controlled precision. Hadley took a deep breath and stepped out. The sun was hot on his back, but there was a different kind of heat settling in his gut. Something about this felt off. He adjusted his belt and approached the driver's side, hand resting lightly on his holster. The door swung open with a metallic groan, and out stepped the trucker. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and built like someone who had spent a lifetime carrying weight heavier than just cargo. His denim shirt was worn but clean, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms crisscrossed with old scars. A cowboy hat sat low over sharp eyes that studied Hadley with something between amusement and patience. Hadley straightened his posture. License and registration. The trucker didn't say anything at first, just reached into his back pocket, slow and deliberate. No sudden moves. He handed over his wallet and Hadley flipped it open. The name meant nothing to him yet. "You know why I stopped you?" Hadley continued, hoping to sound authoritative. The trucker exhaled slowly, as if debating whether this conversation was worth his time. Then he spoke. His voice was deep, calm, and carried the weight of someone who had seen things Hadley never would. "Son," he said, "do you really want to do this?" Hadley's jaw clenched. Something about the way he said it calm, steady, like a teacher trying to warn a student before they failed a test sent a ripple of doubt through him. The silence stretched between them. The desert air was still. The wind didn't even seem to move. Hadley squared his shoulders, masking the sudden unease creeping up his spine. He was the law here. And this trucker? He was just another guy passing through. Or so he thought. Hadley clenched his jaw, staring at the trucker in front of him. Something about the man's presence made the rookie officer's skin prickle. There was no fear in his eyes, no nervous shifting, no stammering excuses, just a calm, quiet authority. That set Hadley on edge. "I asked you a question," Hadley said, his voice harder this time. "Do you know why I stopped you?" The trucker let out a slow breath, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "You pulled me over for no real reason," he said. His voice was steady, almost bored. "Ain't speeding, ain't drinking, ain't smuggling anything, so tell me, officer, what exactly are we doing here?" Hadley's ears burned. His grip on his belt tightened. This was his Stoffa's moment to show that he wasn't some small-town deputy destined for boring highway patrol. And this guy? He wasn't about to let some washed-up cowboy walk all over him. "Step away from the truck," Hadley ordered. The trucker tilted his head slightly, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That really necessary?" Hadley's hand inched toward his holster. Now. The air between them thickened. The sun seemed hotter. The dust, heavier. The trucker let out another slow breath and took a step forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. He kept his hands visible, but something about his movements controlled, confident made Hadley's pulse hammer in his ears. "Turn around," Hadley snapped. "Hands on the truck." Nothing. The trucker didn't move. I said, "Turn around." The trucker's smirk disappeared. His jaw tightened just slightly, and for the first time, Hadley felt the shift. The power dynamic had flipped. Hadley's frustration boiled over. "Don't make me repeat myself," he growled, stepping closer. The trucker exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. "Son," he muttered, "you're making a mistake." That was it. The last straw. Hadley reached out, grabbing the trucker's arm, and that's when everything changed. The second Hadley grabbed the trucker's arm, he knew he had made a mistake. It was like grabbing steel wrapped in leather solid, immovable. Before he could react, the trucker moved. It wasn't fast. It wasn't flashy. It was efficient. One step to the side, a quick twist of his wrist, and suddenly Hadley's own momentum sent him stumbling forward. His hand instinctively shot toward his gun, but before he could even touch the holster, the trucker's grip locked onto his wrist like a vice. "Don't," the trucker said. Hadley froze. The air between them was dead silent, except for the distant hum of the highway. The trucker wasn't squeezing his wrist hard enough to hurt, just enough to send a message. And Hadley got it loud and clear. He looked up into the man's face and, for the first time, really saw him. The weathered skin, the steady, unblinking gaze. The kind of calm that came from years of seeing things no rookie cop ever had. Hadley swallowed hard. Who are you?" The trucker let out a slow breath and finally released his grip. "Let's just say," he muttered, "I've been on both sides of a badge." Hadley took a shaky step back. His pride screamed at him to do something to reassert control. But his gut told him the truth. This wasn't some ordinary trucker. This was someone who had been in fights that made police stops look like playground scuffles. And he had just tried to put cuffs on the wrong man. Hadley took another step back, but his legs felt weak. His heart pounded in his chest, and for the first time in his short career, he realized he had no control over the situation. The trucker wasn't some scared civilian or reckless drifter. He was something else, something dangerous. The older man cracked his knuckles, watching Hadley with the same look a seasoned fighter gives to an amateur who just stepped into the ring for the first time. "You ever been in a real fight, son?" the trucker asked, his voice low and steady. Hadley swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. He wanted to answer, but the words stuck. The trucker exhaled through his nose and shook his head. "Didn't think so." He turned slightly, looking at the police cruiser still flashing behind them. "You know, you boys used to be something. There was a time when a badge meant you knew how to handle yourself. These days," he let out a dry chuckle, "they give a gun and a uniform to just about anyone." Laughter. Hadley's stomach twisted when he realized where it was coming from. A few yards away, leaning against their cars, were two senior deputies. They had been watching the entire exchange, arms crossed, smirking. They weren't stepping in, they weren't helping, they were just enjoying the show. One of them shook his head. "Damn, rookie," he said, chuckling. "You really picked the wrong guy today." Hadley's face went red. "Shut up," he snapped. The deputies just laughed harder. The trucker folded his arms across his broad chest. "Lesson number 1, kid. If you gotta pull a gun to control a situation, you were never in control to begin with." The words stung, because Hadley knew they were true. The trucker sighed, as if this whole thing was just a waste of his time. "Now," he said, stepping closer, "you got 2 choices. You can keep pushing this, let your little ego dig you into a hole, and find out firsthand why I don't lose fights." His eyes darkened just slightly. "Or, you can walk back to that car, take a deep breath, and rethink how you treat folks who've been around longer than you've been alive." Hadley clenched his fists, his face burning with humiliation. Behind him, the deputies were grinning. "Better listen to the man, rookie," one of them said. The trucker smirked. Smartest thing they've said all day. Hadley's whole body screamed for him to do something to salvage his pride, to prove he wasn't weak. But deep down, he knew he had already lost. Without another word, he turned, marched back to his cruiser, and yanked open the door. The trucker called out one last time. "And kid?" Hadley paused. "Next time you pull someone over, make damn sure you know who you're messing with." The deputies burst into laughter again. Hadley slammed the door and sped off, leaving nothing behind but the sound of his career's worst mistake. As the rookie cop's cruiser disappeared down the dusty highway, the trucker let out a slow breath, shaking his head. He had seen this kind of thing before, young men who thought power came from a badge or a gun, mistaking fear for respect. But respect wasn't something you could take. It was something you earned. The 2 senior deputies walked up, still grinning. One of them clapped the trucker on the shoulder. "That was something, old man. Kid's gonna be feeling that one for a while. The trucker just shrugged. Better he learns today than when it's too late. He turned back toward his rig, his boots crunching on the gravel. Some folks gotta get knocked down before they understand how to stand up the right way. One of the deputies shook his head, still smirking. You know, he's probably gonna put in a report on this. The trucker paused, glancing back. And what's he gonna say? That he pulled a gun on a guy for no reason and got embarrassed? He smirked. Let him try. He climbed up into his truck, settling into the seat like he had done 1,000 times before. The engine rumbled to life beneath him, steady and powerful, just like always. He took one last look in the side mirror, seeing the deputies still standing there, shaking their heads, talking quietly among themselves. And in that moment, he knew something. That rookie would remember this day for the rest of his life. Maybe he'd learn from it. Maybe he'd become the kind of officer who understood that real authority wasn't about dominance, it was about responsibility. Or maybe he wouldn't. But either way, the trucker didn't care. His job wasn't to teach lessons. His job was to haul cargo, keep moving, and live life by his own rules. And that's exactly what he was gonna do. As the truck roared forward, dust kicking up behind him, he thought about all the other times he had crossed paths with young men like that. Some learned, some didn't. But the road had a funny way of humbling everyone sooner or later. Maybe that rookie would figure it out before it was too late. Maybe next time he'd think twice before he pulled over the wrong trucker. What do you think? Have you ever seen someone let their ego write a check they couldn't cash? Or maybe you've been in a situation where you had to remind someone that experience beats arrogance every time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we'd love to hear your stories. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories of real-world justice, old school wisdom, and people learning lessons the hard way. Because out here on the road, respect isn't given, it's earned.